Tell me a bit about your internship.
Yeah, I spent the summer at Columbus at a company called WillowTree, who specializes in state-of-the-art mobile app. I've specifically worked with our client in McGraw-Hill on their My Access application, which is a state-of-the-art ebook platform, which is supposed to be made globally for med school students. I was specifically a backend, back end in quotes. I was more of a middleware, which basically serves as the glue between our real backend, which is another database vendor, and then our front end, which is two other teams on our platform. I worked specifically on consuming. I worked on a lot of backend tickets, but one of my major contributions was I worked on consuming our database vendors' APIs and then transforming the data using our active data models to something that the front ends could consume. And so basically making APIs for the front ends to consume, and they would use that information when they were outputting to the user. I also worked on quality of life tickets, such as logging. Logging was a big issue since we were active project in production, and we'd have a lot of crashes and bugs, and it was very hard to track those with the standard NestJS logging. So what I did was I made a whole new module that all our logs would be tracked through, and it would basically make them in a standardized JSON format. And some of the advantage of that is that you can run queries against them to see what your biggest bugs are, how often they're happening, and in a real life scenario where our app crashes, you could get data really quick on why it's happening, what we need to fix. Is it something on AWS side? Is it something on our side? And then I worked with an amazing team, as you can see in that photo. We were Android, iOS, and middleware, and in a Scrum Agile methodology with 2 designers and a product manager.
Explain what you feel most proud of that you accomplished during your internship and why you are proud of these accomplishments.
I think one of my biggest accomplishments was technical depth, especially this recommended content API. This was near the end of my internship. And at this point, I had gotten enough technical knowledge to be able to craft an API using our infrastructure from scratch. I worked on this from the beginning to the end. I picked up the ticket. I made data models. I called our other API vendor, and then I also transformed the data. And I did it from scratch without any help from anyone else. And I got it up in PR and got it up in production.
Describe the most important technical thing you learned during your internship and why it was important.
I think REST APIs, we dealt in a lot of API calls, but most of them, well, I guess all of them were in REST. And then also another thing, another technical is Nest, which is a Node.js framework. I never worked in a Node.js server-side framework. Nest was amazing. It lets it basically uses a controller module where you controller to make API calls and all the documentation and the logging. And it was just a very fun journey to learn Nest.js. I also dabbled a little bit in TypeScript. Well, not dabbled a little bit. I used TypeScript because that's the main language that Nest.js runs on, which is also a fun learning experience. And then finally, AWS.
What is the most important non-technical thing you learned during your internship?
I think collaboration, especially since I was on an agile team, which had 2 front-end teams that we reported to as the only sole middleware team. So I had to communicate with the Android engineers. I had to communicate with platform engineers who oversaw everything. And I had to also communicate with iOS engineers. And there was a lot of times, because these tickets are pretty in-depth, but they still sometimes lacked specific things. So I had to reach out to them. I also had to find the delicate balance of researching on my own, using my resources versus seeking help. There's many times that I should have sought help, but I continued on my own and wasted hours and hours chasing rabbit holes. There's also many times that I probably could have looked more into documentation, more into the ticket, more into details before I reached out to an engineer, just for him to reply or them to reply with, it's right there in the ticket. Thank you very much. How long is that?